You can.
I'm Brian Rising from the Diocese of Beaumont, and we are glad to have you here, Mark, representing the Sophia Institute and its resources that I think will be very, very timely in regarding to all this COVID-19. So go ahead and take it away and maybe start with prayer. And
Sure, absolutely. We'll start with prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear God, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your grace, for your mercy, and we ask for your guidance as we all face whatever is coming this fall, and help us to trust in you and knowing that you're never going to put more on our plate than we can handle. Just we ask for the Holy Spirit's guidance as we make our decisions, as we figure out what we're going to do. Let all of our decisions be rooted in you and rooted in following your holy will. We ask this through Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so for those who don't know, my name is Mark Kaschak with Sophia Institute for Teachers. And what we're going to be looking at today is the Spirit of Truth program, as well as a little brief overview of the Family of Faith program. I unfortunately am not the point person for Family of Faith, so I will be able to give you a very brief overview, but I'd also love to connect you all with my colleague Suzanne, who will be much better equipped to tell you anything that you want to know about that program, but I will speak about it just briefly. We're also going to be taking a look at how this Spirit of Truth program looks on our new digital platform, which we just released, and we're very excited about. So that is more or less what's going to be happening there. And this is going to kind of take place in, a program overview, to kind of show the ins and outs, what makes the program unique, as well as what this all looks like structurally in a sample session. Now, the sample session itself is going to look as if it is a print program, but something that's very important to note is that the digital edition and the print edition of Spirit of Truth mirror each other in content entirely. So really the only differences between the two is where, in the print edition, it might say, turn to page 37. In the digital edition of Spirit of Truth, it would instead say navigate to X, Y, or Z activity. Other than that, they are the same program. So when we look at the sample session, though it does look kind of like a PDF, the digital edition is so much more than that. And that sample session is more to show you kind of the educational approach and the content that you could expect from a session. So just something to keep in mind there. And of course, we're going to have time at the end for questions, but I also want to encourage you to kind of jump in with any questions you have. As we go through. I'd much rather this be like a conversation than me just kind of throwing facts at you for an hour. So Sophia Institute for Teachers is a nonprofit that was started in 2013. We're a division of Sophia Institute Press, whom you may have heard of. They're a great Catholic book publishing company that's been doing their thing for a few decades now. So the teacher side of operations was started in 2013 with the main mission of honoring the vocation of teachers and catechists. So the way that we did that at the outset, and what we're still doing today, is professional development workshops. So not right now, technically we're not doing those, but what we usually would do is we'd bring you all into a nice, beautiful venue where you can sit within 6 feet of each other, and we feed you actual hot meals, real breakfast and lunch, not just granola bars and yogurt, but real food. And then we'd bring in a Catholic scholar to speak on a specific topic. And then one of our veteran catechist team members would come in and offer some catechesis for you on that topic so that you could learn something new. We send you away with a thematic guide to be able to use in your classroom, some new resources, some new teaching strategies. We try to make it a really nice, worthwhile use of your time. So the reason I bring all of that up is because when we started doing those workshops, we realized that there was a genuine need in the Catholic sphere for a new religion program, one that was really beautiful, really high in quality, really faithful to the church, but also very catechist supportive and catechist friendly. So seeing the need for that, we decided to just kind of fill it ourselves, and that's really what the Spirit of Truth program became. And it's going to give you everything that you need to properly catechize your students, and I'm going to highlight a few of the things that make it a little bit different from some of the other stuff you might be seeing out there. So one is that it's very activity-based, and this is true of both the digital and the print edition of Spirit of Truth. This means your students are going to be getting their hands on the faith. They are going to be interacting with the faith, applying it to their own lives, learning how to live out these concepts in their lives, not just learning the information, right? And so the way that's preserved in the digital edition is we recommend that there be some direct catechesis, direct instruction between an educator and a student, even with the digital edition, whether via Zoom or a pre-recorded video of going through the steps in the session, or if you would rather have, you know, the parents be running the digital edition from their home with their kids in person, that's also a way you could do it. But either way, the Spirit of Truth program, whether print or digital, is built on the foundation of an interaction between the catechist and the student. So that's something crucially important about our program. It's broken down into 33 sessions per grade level. Now, you have a lot of flexibility in making that schedule work for you. We actually have resources that we've created to help you pare down Spirit of Truth to fit your parish's schedule if you don't have 33 sessions. I'll show you that a little bit later, but worry not if your parish doesn't have 33. You don't need to, you know, rush through the program just to make it fit. There are two different books or, you know, platforms, I guess you could say, in the digital edition that are involved with Spirit of Truth. You have your student workbook or your student app and your catechist guide. So these are two very different books from each other, and you do need both of them to go through the program. One is kind of incomplete without the other. So that's just something very much worth noting. You're going to see an example of that when we take a look at the sample session. The program is rooted in Scripture. It's rooted in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You can actually see in the front matter of every unit where in the Catechism and where in Scripture the content up ahead relates, just kind of as a touchstone for you as the catechist to know that it has that fidelity to the Church. It's also an entirely adaptable program. Now, what this means for you and your catechists is that they can use it very well no matter what kind of catechist they are. So the way it was explained to us recently that we really liked is, you know, Spirit of Truth session plans are kind of like recipes in that, you know, if you're a first-time chef and you've never cooked a day in your life and you're terrible at it, like me, then you could follow a recipe to the letter and more or less end up with a really great class, you know what I mean? But by that same token, if you've been baking for 50 years, you could probably look at a recipe and say, you know, that step is, you know, I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to swap out this ingredient for that one. I'm going to do this ingredient, this step out of order, and you're probably still going to end up with a really great souffle, right? So Spirit of Truth can be used in that same exact way. You know, we understand that not every catechist has a medication, so we do put a lot of catechist support throughout in the catechist guides, but if you follow the session plans to the letter, you're going to end up with a really great session. And by that same token, you can play with it. You can make it adaptable, and you can make it fit really well for your classroom. And the reason for that is because the program was written and tested by catechists and teachers. So not only is the content really solid, but it was created by people who know what it takes to make a good class, right? We also use sacred art reflection as activities all throughout the program. So here are some examples of some of the sacred art you might see in Spirit of Truth. And rather than just showing them the sacred art and then telling them what's significant about it, we give the students the opportunity to tell us what they think about it, whether through leading questions, kind of like what you're seeing on the right side of your screen, or even as simple as, you know, what do you like about this painting, or what don't you like about it? With that, the students' gears get turning, you know, and their inspiration is coming out, and this is exactly the feedback we've gotten from our parishes using Spirit of Truth, is that their students are more engaged and more vocal and active in class, and they're citing these sacred art reflections as a major reason why that is. So after hearing that, we kind of just doubled down on it, so we have tons of sacred art all throughout the program. You heard me mention kind of at the beginning that we also wanted to make sure our program was very catechist friendly and catechist supportive. So one of the ways that we do that is by including background essays at the beginning of every single unit. These are for the catechist. It's quick few paragraphs that gives them solid information on whatever it is they're about to teach, because an educator can't teach what they don't know, right? So we want to make sure that all of our catechists have the same basic foundational knowledge of whatever they're about to teach, so they can feel that much more comfortable in their ability to do so. And then on the right side of your screen, you see a few different visual cues there, like color-coded moments when there's some crucial information or direct instruction for the students, just so the catechist doesn't miss that in the catechist guide, or smaller thumbnails of the student workbook pages that are going to be used at that exact point in the session, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, literally and figuratively, right? So we have different visual cues throughout the catechist guide, again, to guide the instruction along and make sure that every catechist ends up with a really solid class. We also want to make sure that our catechists are capitalizing on their best tools as teachers, right? In my opinion, their greatest tool is their witness to their own faith, right? So that's why we have these share your faith icons kind of all throughout the program. So What this looks like in practice is you could be teaching a session on sacrifice, for example, and one of these icons would pop up that says, share your faith. Talk about a time in your life when you had to sacrifice something for your faith. What did that mean for your relationship with Christ and how your faith grew, and how do you see it differently now than you did then, right? And so what this does for our students is it solidifies in their minds the idea that their faith is something that has relevance outside of your classroom and outside of church every Sunday morning, right? It's something they're going to carry forward with them into adulthood, because here it is in the example of their adult catechists in front of them. So it's such a strong tool that your catechists have, and we just want to make sure that they're getting the best use of it. So a few other things just to wrap up here, what makes Spirit of Truth different, kind of on a base level here, is when you use Spirit of Truth, you're going to be teaching as Christ taught, which is really cool when you think about it. So we recognize that Christ had a teaching method that he used pretty consistently throughout the Gospels. You know, he drew near to his students. He talked with them. He walked with them. He fished with them. He asked them questions, and he learned about their lives, right? So the reason he did that is so that he could, from that point, more easily lead them deeper into some new concept about their faith, right? So that's exactly the way we have every session set up. You're going to see in a moment here when we take a look at the sample session that every session is broken down into the same basic two parts of the warm-up and then the selection of activities. So the warm-up is a shorter activity that almost always touches on your students' personal experience. And it's for that reason we recommend it always be taught, because it emulates Christ's teaching method. Helps you to get to know your students so that you can use that to help them more easily grasp these new concepts about their faith and also be able to apply it to their own lives, right? We also want to make sure that there is a healthy balance between the head and heart knowledge, meaning, you know, that the facts and the figures about the church and about Christ are crucially important. And what they do is they open up the opportunity for us to have a relationship with Christ and live out the faith, right? So we want to make sure that we're balancing those two as well. You're going to see an example of that in the sample session as well. We also have you covered on sacramental prep, no matter the situation. The first reconciliation and first Holy Communion preparation material is actually built directly into the second grade textbook. We also have a confirmation supplemental called Sealed in Fire, which is currently, as we speak, being brought over to the new digital platform. So you'll be able to do your confirmation on the digital platform as well. So that's very exciting. No matter the situation, we've got you covered there. We also have a ton of excellent online resources that are included with Spirit of Truth, and a lot of those resources do a lot to engage the family, get mom and dad involved, make sure the catechesis remains strong at home, and I'm going to show you all those resources as well. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff today, but it's all really good, exciting stuff that's going to help you invite your students to the faith in a super meaningful way. And I guess a really good way to see how this looks in practice on the day-to-day is to take a look at a sample session. So what I'm going to do is switch my screen share over to this PDF. So what you see here is the necessity of virtue on your screen, right? So what we're looking at today is the grade 4 session for virtue. So just something to keep in mind as far as that grade level. It's kind of, I picked something kind of middle of the road for the sample session. So the approach is consistent, the structure is consistent throughout all the grade levels, but just something to keep in mind as you think about the age appropriateness of the activity. So for the first page of our session, we're going to see what our students will learn as well as what they're going to be doing. And then we get to our session at a glance page, which has a few sections here. The first is the workbook pages that your students are going to be completing in this session. The next is a materials bar that shows you everything that you're going to need in addition to the catechist guide and the student workbook. But as long as you have those books and everything in your materials bar, you have 100% everything you need to go through this session. And then it lists the prayer for the session, which every session is going to begin with, right? And then after that, we get into the actual session plan with all the step-by-step instructions for that pre-made session. So before I dive headfirst into this, I want to reiterate again that every session is broken down into the warm-up and the selection of activities. And like I said, the warm-up touches on your students' personal experience to help emulate Christ's teaching method. But the secondary purpose that the warm-up serves is to help your students to shake off the rust, whatever that might be. So what I mean by that is, you know, your students may have just come from soccer practice or talking to their friends, or they might just be daydreaming at the beginning of your class for all you know. But the point is, the warm-up is a great way for them to shake that off, leave it behind, so they are prepped and ready to get into the meat of the teaching when you get to the activities, right? And then you have your selection of activities. And I stress the word selection there, again, going kind of back to that adaptability. You have the ability to play with that, the order, whether or not you want to do all of the activities. That could be a way that you could pare down the time if you need to. But you can also follow it right to the letter, and that would be perfectly fine as well. So I'm going to go through this session as normal and point out a few visual cues throughout, just so you can see those as well. So for the warm-up, again, we're going to begin with the prayer for the session. And then part B, we're going to ask our students if any of them have accomplished something noteworthy through practice. So for example, let's say you had a student who's really good at playing piano, right? And part C, you would ask them to explain what it was like the first time they used that skill. So your piano player might say, well, it was kind of frustrating because my hands were a lot smaller and my feet couldn't reach the pedals and I, didn't know how to read sheet music, couldn't hear the melodies, etc. So it was kind of frustrating, right? So part B, you would ask them to explain, whether or not it became more or less enjoyable the more they grew in that skill. And of course, 11 times out of 10, they're going to say it became more enjoyable, because why wouldn't that be the case, right? I see a question coming in, so I'm going to pause really quickly just to address it. So the warm-ups will be tailored for each specific grade level, correct? Yep, so every single session, every activity in every session is tailored to the specific grade level and age appropriate for that grade level. That's correct. So every warm-up is different per session, and every session is tailored for the grade level that it's in. So yeah, part D, they're probably gonna tell you that it became more enjoyable when they got better at that skill. So then part E, you're gonna open it up to the rest of the class and say, does anyone else have any skills where they see the same thing being true for you, right? So anytime we have you open it up to the class, we like to list some examples of student responses you might expect to hear, just as a way to help guide the instruction along, guide the discussion along, make sure it doesn't go too far off the rails, right? So some of the examples we have underneath are, playing a new video game isn't as much fun before you know how to control the character, or typing on a keyboard isn't as much fun when you don't know where all the letters are, right? So then part F, you're going to choose one of these examples and say, okay, let's illustrate how when you grow in this skill, not only does it become more enjoyable, but it allows you to do cooler and cooler things with that skill, right? So again, we have an example underneath of learning to swim. So with learning to swim, your first step is to overcome your fear. After that, you can get in the water and then learn to dog paddle, learn new strokes, so on and so forth, until eventually you're winning gold medals in the Olympics, right? So then part G, we're going to open it up to the rest of the room again and say, okay, now does anyone have any examples of this? How did your video game skill allow you to do cooler and cooler things when you grew in it? Were you able to beat new levels, right? Were you able to increase your typing speed, all those different things? So students are going to be jumping in with their own examples. And something that I want to note about part G here, let's say you get to part G and hands are going in the air at rates you've never seen before, right? And everyone's jumping in with their own examples because finally something in religion class has to do with their lives, and they relate to it, and they see examples of it in their own lives. And you look up at the clock and you realize that all you had time for was getting through part G of the warm-up. I don't know about you, but that sounds like an excellent problem to have. So something that we really, really teach here at Sophia is quality over quantity. Again, by no means are we expecting you to get through every single letter of this program. We just want to make sure you end up with a really great class. So if you get to a point where your students are too engaged for you to have time for the rest of the session, I don't even know if too engaged is in our vocabulary, right? So this is something that we really want to make sure you understand is just go for the excellent session, run with it if it's something that's clicking, right? But let's assume for the sake of this example that we do have time to continue on. We're going to go with part H here. Conclude with that super clear statement now at this point that says, skills become more enjoyable and provide opportunity for greater satisfaction in those skills when we grow in them, right? Part I is where we're going to start to flip it on its head and apply it to this new concept about their faith, right? So now you're going to ask your students, what does what we just learned have to do with virtue and being virtuous? Could it also be true that virtue is a skill, one that's frustrating at first, that we have to practice at? Does growing in that skill allow us to do cooler and cooler things with virtue, right? And so the answer to all of these questions is absolutely yes, but our students are so much more easily able to grasp that idea now that they've already thought of it in terms of keyboarding and video games and piano and swimming, whatever their skills end up being, it's personal life experience, they can apply to this new concept about their faith. So that's kind of the approach that we like to take. And now that we've done the warm-up, we've shaken off the rust, we're thinking about virtue, we're thinking about growing in skills, now we're ready to dive deeper into this concept. So let's just go with activity 1 here just to see what we're working with. Activity 1, part A, we're going to write on the board this brief statement from the Catechism that says the moral virtues are acquired by human effort, They're the fruit and seed of morally good acts. Right? Part B, you could rephrase this for your students to say, you know what this means is we need to try to be virtuous, or we need to work at doing morally good things, right? And then you can bring in this metaphor of virtue as both the fruit and seed of morally good acts. You know, this is what helps this plant to grow and bear the fruit of virtue, right? And then part C, you could explain the Holy Spirit's role in this by using some more inductive reasoning, right? You could ask your kids, think back to your science class. What do trees need in order, or plants need in order to grow well, right? And so your little scientist might say, well, it needs good soil and sunlight and water, right? You could say exactly, that's what the Holy Spirit is for this whole process. The Holy Spirit is like the good soil and the sunlight and the water that helps to cultivate the seed, help the plant to grow and bear the fruit of virtue, right? So again, kind of using that inductive reasoning to help our students understand, you know, the Holy Spirit's role in virtue. Then part D, we are ready for our students to do an activity in their student workbooks. You can tell because this thumbnail of the student workbook page is pointing right to this exact step in the session. It's just a nice visual reference for you to know that's where the students should be in their workbook. So this is also a crystal clear example of why you need both books to go through the program. Because it's not even until activity 1, part D, that our students are even opening their workbooks. Up to this point, you've been engaging them in group discussions, learning about their lives, having them think about virtue, having them give you examples of where this has been true in their lives, right? And now we're ready to do an activity in the student workbook. So now that we're there, let's flip over the workbook to see what this looks like from the student's perspective. So what we should be seeing now is the fruit and seed activity. This is the student workbook page for this session. Well, one of the student workbook pages for this session, I should say. What they're going to be doing here is they're going to be, again, reading this part of the catechism that says virtues are the fruit and seed of morally good acts. And then they'll be using this space below to draw an illustration of what that looks like to them. So we have a wide variety of hands-on engaging activities for our students, like these illustrations, arts and crafts for our younger kids, but also the group discussions like we saw before in this session, games, role plays, all at age-appropriate levels, just to make sure that our students are getting on their feet and not just reading a bunch of text and being assessed on their knowledge of the text, right? So we want them engaging with the faith, getting their hands dirty with it, and applying it to their own lives. This being good at being good activity is a really good one to kind of take a look at because it illustrates the head and heart knowledge I was talking about before. So for this one, we're going to be thinking of the idea of, you know, what if their goal was to be a movie star? Below are some steps that you might have to take in order to accomplish that goal. You know, you could look for acting classes, audition at casting calls, practice your lines, so on and so forth, right? But again, let's flip it on its head and apply it to virtue. What if your goal was to be a virtuous person? What are some steps that you should take in order to accomplish that goal? You know, write them down below. So this is what I like to call the so what component of Spirit of Truth, and it is present in every single session of the program. It is the part of the session that helps our students to not only ask that question, but also gives them the opportunity to answer it. So what? What does virtue have to do with me? Why should I care about that when I walk out that door? What can I do today to help me apply these concepts to my life right now? So what, you know? So again, this is going to be in every single session of Spirit of Truth, and it's this kind of action-based heart knowledge that's going to help our students to become saints, right? So that's what we want for our students, and that's why we have that in every single session. And something else you might be noticing about the pages of the student workbooks is that they're very clean, they're very distraction-free. So we did that very much on purpose. You know, the research has shown that the more crazy graphics there are in the margins and the more tight text there is on the page, you know, the knowledge retention just goes through the floor to the center of the earth, right? So in an effort to take that in the other direction, that's kind of what we decided to do, and we cleaned up the margins. We made the text design itself conducive to knowledge retention, meaning that in the younger grades, especially, the text is bigger and the spacing is bigger, and as you move up toward the 8th grade, it becomes more normal, right? Because they're able to handle that a little bit better at that age. So everything down to that and the imagery or lack thereof in the margins helps our students to focus on the subject at hand and not distract them from it. So when we do use imagery in the student workbooks, it's used in a way that has an anchor to the subject. So like if you're learning about the Eucharist, you might see a picture of the host or a loaf of bread. You know, it's not going to be kids running through fields with bubble wands or whatever the situation might be. You know, it's going to be something that has a relevance to, that is a relevance, not irrelevant, but it's something that is relevant to the subject matter at hand. Other than that, very clean, very distraction-free. So let's quickly flip back over to the catechist guide just to finish out a session, see how sessions end from your perspective as the catechist. So a few other visual cues here. I think we have the student workbook thumbnails pretty well covered that point to the exact point in the session they'll be used. Again, these color-coded bars that say explain, this is just to jump out of the page at the catechist to let them know there's some crucial information or direct instruction for them to give to their students, just to make sure they don't miss that. We saw the examples of student responses you might expect from a group discussion just to help guide the discussion along, different things like that intended to support the catechist throughout the session. Then every session ends with the same basic two parts. The first is a materials bar for the following session because parishes meet once a week, sometimes even less frequently than that. So we want to make sure your catechists know what they're going to need well ahead of time. And then the student workbook pages are represented nice and big and in full at the very end of the session plan, along with any answer keys in the margins that might be relevant. So if you were looking at these tiny thumbnails up here and thinking, well, that does me no good because I can't really read that, worry not. Student workbook pages at the very end, nice and big for you with answer keys. So you recognize the fruit and seed activity, being good at being good. So those are your student workbook pages at the end of every session. And that's more or less the approach of Spirit of Truth. Now, before I give you a look at what this all looks like on the digital edition, I do want to let you know that there are a lot of excellent online resources that come with Spirit of Truth to help you dive even further into this program should you want to. So I'm going to go over those really quickly. And then after that, we will take a look at the digital edition. So I just started a new screen share. What you should be seeing is our website here. That's the Spirit of Truth Parish Edition online resources. Now, again, these come with Spirit of Truth. They're entirely free to you, and they are just they're not strictly speaking necessary to go through a session, but they give you the opportunity to get even more out of the session. So and I'm going to be sharing this link with all of you as well, so you can peruse this at your leisure, but I'll also go over this right now so you can kind of understand what you're looking at. So the first is video orientation and FAQs. Fewer than 10 videos, each fewer than 3 minutes long. They give you a solid overview of pretty much everything that I just went through. So if you want any of your colleagues to learn about what you learned about today, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I was on this webinar with this really handsome guy today, and this is basically what he talked about. You can view these videos however you want, right? So it's a really good resource for learning about Spirit of Truth. Take-home activities, this is a great resource for our parents. They are activities, obviously, they get sent home for the parents to go through with their kids. Great way to engage mom and dad, but the really great thing about them is that they are offered in Spanish as well as English. So for any of your Spanish-speaking families, it's a great resource for them. Liturgical Year, we have a free bonus session for every single Sunday Gospel, including for Advent, including for Lent. So if you want to tie the liturgical calendar into your sessions in any way, that's really the way to do it. Saint cards are a bunch of biographies on a ton of the different saints, just one-page biographies. So if you want your students to learn more about the saints, this is where you'd send them. Now, for the digital edition, we actually built these saint cards into the student app, and I'll show you that a little bit later. It's pretty cool, but you can also find them here on our website. Catechist resource pages are in the Catechist Guide. They're used as kind of print-out, paper-based activities to do during the session. And you used to have to photocopy those, and we had decided that was a little bit clunky, and we decided to just upload them as PDFs on our website so you can download them, print them out, and you're cooking with gas, just to save you some time and headaches. Sofia Sketchpad, if you don't know about these videos, I highly recommend you check them out. They're excellent dry erase board style animated videos on the sacraments. Now, there is sound included with these, but I'm going to mute it just so it doesn't blast out your speakers or anything like that. But this is a great way for our kids to learn about the sacraments, and the students, the teachers, everyone seems to absolutely love these. Definitely check them out. And they're infused into a lot of the sessions in Spirit of Truth as well, which is pretty cool. Catch the Spirit is a parent newsletter, so obviously a great resource for mom and dad that gives them an overview of everything going on in class. But in addition to that, it also lets them know of a prayer that they could say as a family that relates to the session, as well as a group discussion that mom and dad could facilitate with their kids that relates to the session. So it's a really great resource just to keep everything going and running at home. External videos, so every now and then in the program, it's going to ask you to pull up a video of maybe a talk or a song, something that relates to the session, right? So anytime it asks you to do that, we have the video links listed in our external videos library. This is so that you don't have to go hunting it down yourself on the big, bad, scary, horrible world of YouTube that's getting worse and worse every day, right? So we just give you the direct link here, so you can just start watching right away. So, customized programs. You heard me say at the beginning that Spirit of Truth is broken down into 33 sessions per grade level, but to not worry if you don't have 33 sessions in your program. So the customized programs guide is exactly what you are looking for. So this basically breaks down by grade and by number of sessions in your year, which sessions you should present, right? So we created this guide for you to more easily make that decision of what to cut out in the interest of time if you need to. Again, that's the customized programs guide. So I'm seeing a question about the difference between a family of faith and Spirit of Truth. Right after I wrap up with the online resources, I'll talk about that a little bit, and we can move on to the digital edition as well. More than happy to talk about that. Absent student handouts, great resource obviously for any kids who miss class, but also particularly useful for any students with any learning differences because it's presented in a nice PowerPoint format with bulleted information, really easy to see and use. And it's also intended for mom and dad to go through these handouts with the students, so good resource for the parents as well. Unit tests and weekly quizzes, that's pretty self-explanatory, but the cool thing about them is that when you download them, they are in Word document format, meaning you can edit them in any way you choose. So you can add questions, you can remove questions, you can use it as a template for a test of your own devising, you can delete the entire thing and write your term paper on it. We don't really care what you do, but the point is you have the ability to edit these tests and quizzes after you download them. And then we have a more resources section, which basically just lists by grade any resources we feel that could be useful in a given session. So if you're coming up on session 24 in grade 5, prayers for the anointing of the sick might be worth considering. So just an additional thing to keep an eye on, along with any session planning charts in here if you want to make use of those. So those are the excellent online resources there, and I'm going to be sharing this link with all of you so you can peruse that at your leisure, but now you kind of have an idea of what you're looking at. So before we continue on to the digital edition, I'm going to talk about the difference between Spirit of Truth and a family of faith. So everything we've been looking at so far is Spirit of Truth. So that is a K-8 parish religious ed-based program, right? So it's intended to be more for the classroom, but obviously this digital edition allows us to do a lot of excellent remote stuff with it. So the difference between that and family of faith essentially is that a family of faith was built to be a family catechesis program where mom and dad or the parent, the guardian, is doing the heavy lifting at home with the catechesis. The idea was to strengthen the domestic church, right? So the way family of faith is structured is it's broken down into 4 different years based on the 4 pillars of the catechism. And you're meant to be able to cycle through the years again and again at age-appropriate levels, even contained within 1 year. Right, and each year itself is contained, so you can really hop into the seasons, I guess you could call them, at any time. And the way that it is implemented is you have, regular community meetings, typically once a month, but it can really be whatever frequency you want. There's a lot of flexibility with family of faith, but you have community meetings where you have your parish leader, your catechetical leader, that offers some catechesis for the parents at that community meeting, right? So the parents are becoming catechized and they're becoming better equipped as catechists so that they can be strong at home with their kids. And then between those monthly meetings, the parents are running through the program with their kids and the parents are delivering the direct catechesis for their children. So in Family of Faith, you have 3 different books. You have your parents guide, you have your leader guide, and you have your children's activity book. So obviously the parents guide is what the parent uses to go through the sessions at home. The children's activity book is what the child uses for their various activities when they're being catechized. And the leader book is what the leader uses to help catechize the parents, right? So it is a bit of a different program. It's not intended to be classroom-based, and it is more focused on the domestic church rather than a classroom setting religious ed program. So that's essentially the lay of the land on a family of faith. And again, Suzanne Walsh, my colleague, is going to be much better equipped to dive much deeper than that on what you can expect from it. So I see a question coming in about it, though, so I'll see if I can address this. Parents with multiple children do lessons with the whole family, or do they work with the children individually? Yes, you can do it with the whole family. So the intention with a family of faith is it gives you kind of a modular, ability to stretch in various directions with the age group. So it is intended for you to be able to work with your whole family. Absolutely. So I'm afraid we have more or less reached my ceiling of knowledge on a family of faith, but I'm glad to send you away with that at least basic understanding where if that sounds like something that if that excites you, then I definitely would pursue it. It's an excellent program and you're going to be in very good hands with Suzanne. So, regardless of whether you use Family of Faith, Spirit of Truth, Digital Edition, print edition, no matter what, we are here for you on a very personal level in addition to the online resources and the pre-made session plan, all of that. So what we actually do with you is we sit you down with a one-on-one orientation, kind of like what we're doing right now. You know, you'd be able to talk back to me and everything, and one of our veteran catechist team members would sit you down, your DRE, your catechist, your pastor, your janitor, whoever wants to be a part of this program, and we are going to run you through everything, every part of the program, even more in depth than what I've gone through today, to make sure that if there is a transition of any kind, it's as smooth as possible. You'll have the opportunity to ask as many questions as you want, and we're going to make sure you are connected with the resources that you need. And in addition to that, we are available to you for the life of the program. So 8 years down the road, if you're still using Spirit of Truth or Family of Faith, whatever the situation, you still have us to reach out to and say, hey, long time no talk, but this new thing started happening. We're not quite sure how to handle it. What do you recommend? We'll be able to help you out. So we want to make sure you're very personally supported, in addition to everything else that I've already gone over today. So now, without further ado, let's take a look at this digital edition. Pretty exciting stuff. So the digital edition is broken into two basic parts. And again, this digital edition, what I'm talking about right now, is for Spirit of Truth. Family of Faith is not yet on this digital platform. We do have something called a Family of Faith online, but really what that means is we at Sophia would help run those monthly community meetings virtually so that your parish won't have to meet in person in these pandemic times, right? So we would help run that virtually, and then you would otherwise run the program normally. And that's kind of a per family subscription. You kind of subscribe to the service to do that. So that's a Family of Faith online. But that program itself is not yet on this digital platform. What we're looking at right now is for Spirit of Truth, the K-8 classroom-based program. So the two basic parts of the Spirit of Truth digital edition are the admin portal and the student app. Okay, so I'm going to go over the admin portal first and then the student app. So what we're looking at right now is our dashboard for our main administrator. So there are three basic sections when you log into your admin portal. I know you see 4 up here, but I want you to ignore the blue one. So this curriculum management section, this is for us here at Sophia. This is for us to upload the content for you to access. This is not something any of you would be able to see when you log in, so just ignore the blue one. We're only going to be looking at the green one, the gray one, and the orange one. So the green one is user management. So this user management section is really going to be viewable by just your system admin. That's typically your DRE, but really it can be anyone who you want to define as the system admin. This is where you're going to be able to manage all of the content, all of the users, and all of that for your program. So I'm going to zoom in on this until this sidebar goes away, just to make sure that we can see everything here. So the basic sections you have in your admin portal are your institutes, which is basically just your parish. It's pretty much going to only list your parish. Right now, it shows a whole bunch of different parishes, but you would really only see the one that's relevant to you. And then you have your classes, which you can show your list of classes here, and it'll show what institute it belongs to, and it will, again, really just be your institute, the grade level that it is. Then you have the ability to import data into it. So this is where you would be able to batch upload your students to your classes. So you don't have to create students one at a time by filling out the form, hit submit, and then go on to the next student. You can do that if you want, but I don't know why you would do that if you have a ton of students. I think our parishes in Texas would probably kill us if we made them upload students one at a time. So we have this template that you can download as a CSV doc. You fill out all the information on the sheet, and then you re-upload it, and it organizes all of your students into the system for you. So then you have the ability to just create a class on a one-off instance if you want to. Just enter the class name, the institute it belongs to, grade level, all of that different stuff. Then we have our system users. That's basically you and your team. So it would be your DRE, all of your catechists, your system admin, all of that. You can, again, list the system users or hit create. Let's say you hire a new catechist, then you can go to create and add a new system user. And then we have our students, which again, we have list and create. It's getting pretty consistent here. So we have our list of students at our various institutes, and the ability to create a student. Again, you can create students one by one if you want to, but again, we have that import data function for you to be able to batch upload this. Then these two sections are actually kind of new. One of them is status updates, where we can just kind of see, we can basically let you know if the system's running well. And then we have a setup help section where when you click on the setup help section, it takes you to our quick start guide and lets you know exactly step by step what you as a system admin need to do in order to get everything set up. It's very thorough, but also, again, we're here for you personally should you need any additional support, anything like that. But we do have a setup help section here for you as well. So that is the user management section, again, pretty much only viewable by your system admin. Then we have the Teacher's Edition section. So the next two sections, the Teacher's Edition and Curriculum Scoring, these two sections are going to be viewable by your system admin, your catechist, pretty much everyone, right? So your Teacher's Edition is pretty self-explanatory. It is basically the printed catechist guide, but in this new digital platform, all of the same exact content, the same step-by-step instructions with the same steps, right? So the first thing to note is this is how you navigate to your class on the left sidebar, but you would only see the grade level that's relevant to you as a catechist. So if you're just a second grade catechist, you would only see second grade. You wouldn't see like a million different parishes and schools. Again, this is just because I have this administrative login. You would only see second grade parish here, for instance. So when you click on your year, it shows you all your different units. And you basically just navigate to the unit and the session that you want. So when you click on Unit 1, you see all the same overview information that we saw before in the sample session, like our catechist intro pages, the paragraphs that help our catechists to kind of brush up on the knowledge of whatever they're about to teach, right? Then let's say we just go with Session 1 here. So we click on Session 1. And again, it gives us our lesson overview, just like our learning goals, our prayer for the session, the materials list, everything that we would see in the printed edition. Again, the two editions mirror each other in content. I'm going to say that a million times today because I think it's a really cool thing that we've built to give you that flexibility to move back and forth between in-person and remote teaching. Then you can hop over to lesson planning here, and it gives you your warm-up and your activities all step by step, exactly like you see it in the print edition. So you could start your religious ed in person, you know, with the print books and be going through a session, and you could be interrupted mid-session to say, hey, everyone needs to go home, we're on lockdown or whatever, you know, and you could all drive home, log into your digital edition, and resume your session on the exact step that you were on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility with kind of going back and forth. So you'll also notice that under each session is, you know, Baptism of Christ, Trinity, Holy Trinity diorama. These are all of the student activities that are going to be completed in this session. So just like in the print edition where you have the student activity pages at the end of your session, this is kind of how we brought that over to the digital edition. Underneath the session, you can just click on an activity, and it shows you some basic information, just a brief overview of the activities, right, along with the answer keys. But then you can dive even further into it. You can click on an activity and it'll show you a more in-depth answer key. If it's, you know, a sacred art reflection activity, it'll show you the sacred art. So it really gives you a good idea of what the students are going to be seeing. But even beyond that, we also give you some additional student app licenses so that you as a catechist can have a free bonus student app login to see exactly what the student sees on their apps while you're going through, if you want to do anything like that. So we do offer that to you at no charge, but just as a basic level of seeing the information that the student's going to see, you have all of their activity information underneath the session. So that's more or less the Digital Catechist Guide. So the third and final section of the admin portal is the curriculum scoring section. So this is where you are going to have the ability to track your students' progress throughout the program. So you go to you probably wouldn't see the diocese because you as a parish would just be in one diocese. So I'm just going to go into our test parish here in the Diocese of Manchester. And I think I'm in here somewhere. I think I'm in here as a sixth grader. There I am. Well, not a sixth grader, but a sixth grade catechist. So this is essentially what you would see when you log into your curriculum scoring section. So all that navigation that I just did, you won't have to do all of that. That was just so I could get to the level that you would see when you go to this section. So you come here, you're in your class as a catechist to see your scoring portal, and you would basically just pick the activity that you want to see the information for. So you'd navigate to, you know, Unit 1, Session 1, and click on this activity, right? Then you have your list of students on the right, and you would see all of your students in your class. I just have one student in this test class, so the Teresa Avila is the only one that shows up. But when you click on the student in the activity, it shows you the information that the student has submitted for those activities, right? So a really cool thing about this is not only do you get to see the student responses, but you also get the answer key right next to it, so you can kind of check their work. If it's something that is subjective, then you could score it yourself underneath by giving them, 3 out of 3 or whatever. You could hit accept if you wanted to send that through. Or another cool option that we give you is to reassign an activity. So let's say hypothetically you have a short answer activity and one of your students, clicks on the text field and just mashes the keyboard a bunch of times and hits send, right? And then that comes into you and you see that they put in basically no effort to answer the question. You could reassign that assignment to them and say, hey, quarantine's really boring, but why don't you put down the Xbox controller and give us another shot? And then, when that second response comes through, then you could hit accept, and it's marked as accepted. Anything that is subjective, like a multiple choice or a true or false, the system will automatically score for you because we have the proper answers built into the back end. Then we're going to give you the ability to export their information, their response information as an Excel doc, just so you can have that on hand on your own machine. Another option you have is up here, the lock and unlock section. So you can lock and unlock an entire unit or just particular sessions, lock sessions, or lock particular sections of a session, right? So this is so that you can have total control over the pacing of your year. So making sure that students don't just binge through the entire student activity app and then never touch it again, right? So you can lock everything except for session 1 to make sure your students don't go ahead. Or if you're one of those catechists that wants to kind of play with the program, right? Let's say you want to start with session 3 instead of with session 1. You can lock everything except for session 3, and then send a message to your students that says, hey, you might notice that session 3 is unlocked. That's what we're starting with today, so why don't you go ahead and do that, right? And you can send a message to your students. The way you send that message is through this third and final excellent part of the curriculum scoring portal. Communicate with your classroom section. So you click this button, and it brings up this text field for you to send a custom notification to all of your students. So you hit send, and that sends that message to all of your students' apps. There's a notification section in the app that you're going to see in a moment, and it will let them know that there's a new message, and they can tap on it and see the message that the catechist has sent through, right? So a couple things to note about this communicate tool. One, it only allows for the catechist to communicate with the entire classroom all at once. There's no one-to-one communication allowed within the app, just as a security measure. The second security measure we put in place is that when a catechist uses this function, it will automatically copy their message to all of the students' parent emails, just to make sure that we're covering our bases there. If a catechist wanted to communicate one-on-one with the student, they would have to go outside the app somehow. But that's just a nice way they can talk to them about what they're doing that week or what have you. So this is a really great way to kind of track the progress of your students. If you're doing something remote, you need to make sure that everyone's getting their work done. So that's more or less the admin portal. So of course, the other side of this coin is the student app. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new screen share on my iPad here. 3, 2, 1. All right, so what you should be seeing now is my really beautiful iPad. I love this thing. And we're going to hop into the student app so you can take a look at the 2 different student apps we have. And yes, we do have 2, but no need to panic. The only reason we broke it out into 2 apps is because we wanted our K-2 students to have a much simpler navigation experience than our 3-8 students. So really that's the only difference. We have a K-2 app and we have a 3-8 app. Other than that, it's just still the Spirit of Truth program. So first I'm going to log in as our fictional 2nd grader, Jay Butler. She has a super secret password. So what we're about to look at is the 2nd grade app of Spirit of Truth. And this is more or less what they can expect navigationally. What we did is well, first let me talk about how we built the activities in the student app. We combed through every single activity that exists in the print edition of Spirit of Truth, and we were able to organize them into 20+ different activity types. And then we brought all of those activities into this new digital platform, optimized them for the new platform, and then on top of that, created new activities that are only possible on this digital platform, which is pretty cool. So the student app is all of the activities in the print edition and then some. So what we did for the K to 2nd graders is we just broke down all the activities chronologically and put them in a side-scrolling motion. We didn't want our kindergartners or second graders or first graders to have to remember what unit they were in or what session number they were in. We basically just tell them, scroll to, the creation of the world activity and do that, right? So they just have to remember the name of it, and they can go in, tap on the activity, and they're cooking with gas. So again, we have all the activities from the print edition, but in addition to that, we have new activities like these sacred art puzzles that are only possible on this digital platform. So I'm never good at these puzzles, I gotta say. It's kind of embarrassing when I think about it. This one goes here, this one goes here. I mean, you get the idea, you've all done puzzles before. But in a way, I kind of don't want to rest until I get this right. Oh, there we go. Right, and then when they're done, they can hit done, and the screen pops up that lets them know that they did it, and then that information is sent over to the curriculum scoring portal. Jay Butler completed a sacred art puzzle, and now she loves Jesus even more. Another activity that we built into the digital edition that's really only possible is this driving game, the Stewards of Creation driving game, where our students have to drive along, drag this car up and down to collect the things that make them a good steward of the earth and avoid the things that make them a bad steward of the earth, right? And, well, all these things look like good steward of the earth things so far. Oh, smokestacks, gotta avoid that, right? So just fun little games that are educational. We have like point and shoot games where you have to shoot the ball into the basket to answer the question correctly. So that's more or less the experience that the student is going to have. So now that we've kind of taken a look at the student app, just to reiterate again that when you use the digital edition, we're trying to preserve the interactivity between the catechist and the student as much as possible. So you could be over a Zoom meeting giving the same step-by-step instruction just as if you were in the classroom. And every now and then you would be sending your students to their apps to do an activity like the ones that I just showed you. Otherwise, engaging them in group discussions, all the same stuff as if you were right there using the printed books. Or if it was the parent using this program in the home, they could use this in a family catechesis model and just deliver the session right there in person as if their house were a classroom, right? The way it was meant to be. So that is more or less the second grade app. They have a few other buttons up top that I'm going to show you. The little trophy icon is their prizes or their app badges, where they can see anything that they've earned as a result of completing activities or sessions. So just the way that we wanted to gamify the experience. And then this little notification bell, this is where the communicate with your classroom messages would come in. And these are some of the examples of the, the messages I would send in my various app demos. So that's pretty much how the K-2 app is organized, right? But also, the 3-8 app, I want you to see what that looks like. So we're going to log in as C. Walton. He's our fictional 8th grader. So the 8th grade app is organized pretty much like this. So when they log in, they see their selection of units right on the home screen. So we can tell them go into Unit 1 and find Session 3 activity in this activity, what have you, right? So they can swipe to their unit, and when they tap on the unit, this is what the unit overview page looks like. It has this introductory essay that they could read to help them kind of brush up on whatever they're about to learn about. Then on the right side, they have their sessions that they can just scroll right to, so you can tell them to go to Session 6 and, whatever activity you want them to complete. So this is how they navigate to their activities in the session. You'll notice Session 2 is grayed out and it has a padlock next to it. That's what a session would look like if you were to lock that session to keep a student from going forward with that, just to let you know what that would look like. So I mean, this looks pretty sharp. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with what we've done here. It's really awesome that we can just kind of scroll through the sessions and see what we're working with. And then they have some navigation up top here. So we have, the home icon allows them to go back to their unit selection. The book icon makes the paragraphs kind of full screen so that they can read that a little bit more easily. And then the bookmark icon makes the sidebar pop back in. Any vocabulary for their session would be here. And there is vocabulary in the session for 8th grade, just so you are aware. This is a previous build of the app that I have yet to update. So then the Saint cards, that's the little deck of cards with the cross icon on them. I told you before that we had the Saint cards built directly into the app. This is where they are. And so they can just scroll through a ton of the different saints and just tap on any of them and just read about the saint, which I think is so cool. And I wish I had this when I was growing up. Not that I can't learn more about the saints now if I want to, but still, it's pretty awesome. And then we have, again, their trophy case, just like the K-2 students had, as well as their notification section on the bottom there to show any messages that might come through from the catechist. So that's more or less the student app experience with all the same activities from the print edition and then some that are only possible. An example of what an activity that does exist in the print edition would look like on the digital edition. Here's one where they have to read this short essay and then answer some short questions. So this already is in the print edition, but this is what it looks like in digital. So they read the essay, they go to step 2, and then they can enter in their response, right? So this is an example, as you can see, of when you might want to reassign an activity to a student, because clearly C. Walton is not taking this activity very seriously. Looks like C. Walton would rather be playing video games. But that's pretty much the function of it. They have their text field, they can tap and type the answers, tap to the next part of the activity, hit finished, and their submission was successful, albeit not very thorough. And that's more or less the student app. So again, it really gives you that flexibility to go back and forth between remote and in-person teaching. It preserves that interactivity, that incarnational learning between the catechist and the student. And we really think we've made an excellent program that hits all the marks that we initially hit with the print edition of Spirit of Truth. So now I would love to, I'd love to open the floor to any questions here. So what questions does anyone have? If you want to unmute and just shout it out, or just pop it into the chat, do whatever you want to do. I'd love to hear what questions you have.
So any questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the First Communion and First Reconciliation programs were in the 2nd grade text built in.
Right.
What about children in the 4th and 5th grade that haven't made their First Communion? Do you have a supplemental or what?
So though we don't have a dedicated program, what I have had parishes ask me this in the past, and what I typically recommend to them is to go with the 5th grade text, because our 5th grade is on the sacraments. So while it's not a dedicated preparation program, since it is that grade level is built for the sacraments, it's really, really solid information and does a really good job of covering the subjects thoroughly. So the parishes who use the 5th grade for that purpose find that it works really well, so that's probably what I would recommend.
So you're saying that if, let's say I had a 4th grader, that I would just put them in the 5th grade program?
Right, yep, and so
Yeah.
you have some mobility to kind of move them up and down. We even have some parishes who have, combined classes where they just kind of pick them down the middle of the road, and they find that works really well as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Other questions?
Yeah. And if by the way you find that you had a question but it didn't come to you at this very moment, I invite you to get my contact information here and reach out to me with any questions that you might have. It's literally my job to answer them, so please keep me employed. I really like this job, and if you don't call me enough, then they'll probably just see no use for me anymore. So just give me a call, ask me some questions. I'm more than happy to help.
And we will put this on our page. We're recording this so that we can share this with the other parishes out there.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome. Thank you all so much for taking the time to sit down with me. And yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I see something coming into the chat, but I don't. Oh, it's just a thank you. Well, you're very welcome. And yeah, if you have anything else, just feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone, so much.